Can you explain how this recommendation factor into your application?
It's a great question. Letters of recommendation are quite important. That is, if you think about it, that's the only component of your application where somebody else is talking about you. For the rest of your application, you're the one who is writing up a resume or writing a personal statement and talking about yourself and framing the narrative. A letter of recommendation is a little bit of a leap of faith. You ask somebody to write a recommendation for you, and you don't necessarily know what it says. Actually, you probably waived your right to see it in its entirety, and it's not that typical for a recommender to let you know what they said in a letter of recommendation. We get a lot out of them. They tell us about what you're like in class, what you're like interacting with fellow students, and there are applicants who are not sometimes as strong in other areas, but the letters of recommendation just really elevate them, and you get this sense of, this is someone that I want to see in the HARC every day. This is somebody that I would love to share a classroom with if I was in a 1L section. So they can be really quite persuasive. On the flip side, letters of recommendation, when they're weaker, can also really detract from an otherwise quite strong application. So I would recommend choosing recommenders quite carefully. I think that if anyone showcases any hesitation about writing for you, just thank them for their time and then maybe pick somebody else, because when there's a weaker recommendation, it really shows. Recommenders will even say they don't know you that well, or they don't recall you very much from class. So if you're getting that vibe from a potential recommender, again, thank them for their time and move along.
Okay, great to know. What are 3 things you should think about when choosing who to get a letter of recommendation from?
So the first thing I recommend is ensuring that your letters are from people who either know you in an academic context or who can speak to your academic skills. Ideally, you'd have somebody who talks a bit about your writing quality, certainly someone who could speak to what you're like in a discussion, right? So if you're a number of years out of college or a master's degree program and it's harder for you to access academic, think about professional recommenders or recommenders who know you from your life, who can discuss what you would be like in a classroom discussion, what you would be like as a classmate, just kind of like what you are like to interact with, what they know about your writing quality, for example. So that's my primary piece of advice, is to think about people who have an academic perspective or who can speak to what you might be like in an academic setting. Second, think about how the recommendations speak to one another. How are they in conversation? How would someone understand you as a potential student after reading the suite of letters that you submit? That's one of the hardest things to pull off, because of course, you don't know what the recommendations are going to say. But just think about having some variety. If there's somebody who knows you from a small seminar-style class, maybe your other professor is someone who knows you from a one-on-one thesis experience, or someone who knows you from a larger lecture class. It can be interesting to hear what you're like academically in different settings. Similarly, if you're got a professional letter, maybe your other letter is academic, or if you've got 2 academic letters, maybe you think it would be useful to augment them with a professional letter. So just think about how they're all in conversation with each other. The third thing, give your recommenders a lot of time. Almost certainly they are a busy person and time is their most limited resource. You don't want someone to write a letter of recommendation for you on short notice. You don't want it to feel like a chore for them, because you'll see that.
Thank you so much. Having a letter of recommendation from someone working in the legal field, overrated or underrated?
Overrated. It's most important that the recommender knows you well. So if that's somebody who has law or lawyer or legal professional somewhere in their job description or title, then great. But it's more important that they know you than that they have any particular experience, their own prior experience in the law.
Including a third letter of recommendation, overrated or underrated?
Generally overrated. A third letter of recommendation makes the best sense if there's something that the recommender can tell us that hasn't already been said by your first two recommenders. And the most typical profile I see is 2 academic and then 1 professional. But I think it's better to choose, far better to choose 2 recommenders very, very well and thoughtfully than to feel like you need to drum up a third just to kind of feel like you've checked the box for a third letter of recommendation. Because sometimes a weaker third letter can actually dilute 2 stronger letters.